In food-related circles, especially online, there's a sort of a meme in circulation about bay leaves, and it's the notion that they don't have any flavour. So what I want to do today is just test that and just have a think about that. Do bay leaves have any flavour or aroma at all? What's everyone talking about? So yeah, I'm calling it a meme because people seem to be all saying very similar things to each other, which I take as evidence that they're just repeating something they heard somebody else say. And that is typically words to the effect, we'll add a bay leaf, whatever that's supposed to do. Very often you'll find people asking the question, what do bay leaves do? You know, what are they supposed to taste of? They don't taste of anything, surely. Is that true? So I got a couple of bay leaves here that I picked fresh from the garden just a few moments ago. That's an important factor, which we'll come back to in a moment. So I've got 2 bay leaves. One of them I'm just going to crush now. And then smell. So it has crumbled up a bit. So there is an aroma to that. Slight camphor-like aroma, similar to maybe rosemary. A sweetish, resinous smell, like pine needles perhaps. And a kind of spicy, maybe slightly gingery sort of aroma. So there is definitely aroma there. What I'm going to do now is test the flavour. So I'm just going to have a bay leaf, which I'll cover with boiling water. Make sure it's completely covered. And we might as well put the other broken bits of bay leaf in there, just for good measure. So I'm going to make a slightly stronger infusion of bay here than you would maybe get in a casserole if you just put 2, or a soup if you just put 2 bay leaves in a pot. But we're trying to taste what is going on here, so I think that's valid. I'm just going to stick my nose over that and see if I can smell anything coming off. So yeah, there's actually additional aromas coming off of here, which means actually they're evaporating away. But there's a sweet woody scent coming off of that. Not exactly sandalwood, but somewhere in that vicinity. I'm going to let that steep for 10 minutes. And then we'll come back and give it a taste. Right, 10 minutes have elapsed. Let's see what we got here. Remember, this is just 2 bay leaves in 200 ml of boiling water. Well, it was boiling when it went in. Let's pour a nice glass of bay leaf tea and see what it tastes like. Right, well, there's not much to see, although, and I'm not quite sure how well that's going to come across on camera, but to my eye in this room, that is ever so slightly pale green. I can definitely see it when I hold it up to the light. To the nose, more of that camphor-like aroma that it's like a eucalyptus or rosemary or menthol type of, not cough sweet aroma, but it's that kind of penetrating freshness. It's not strong. Also, there's more of the sweet aroma. It's somewhere between vanilla and like fresh hay. So I don't know if that's coumarins or something like that, but it might be. It might be something else. Let's have a little taste. So the flavour's not overpowering, but it's definitely present. There's a great deal of sweetness, but not sugar sweetness. It is like the sweetness of vanilla, but it's not vanilla. It's very difficult to describe flavours, as I'll probably mention more than once in this video. So all I can try to do is compare it to other things, but yeah, there's a sweetness to it. There is a green herbal note to it, you know, like grassy, spinachy, sort of green vegetable note to it, but there's also an aromatic herbal note to it, like the aromas you get from sage, rosemary, thyme, those sorts of things. Not the same as them, but that kind of aromatic herbal note. There's also a slight spiciness to it, a slight nutmeg or woody spicy note to it. And actually, the more of this I drink, the more it's lingering on my palate. So this isn't a strong flavour. This is actually quite a subtle flavour, but it's a lasting one. It's a persistent one. And it builds. And because of the way human perception of taste works, you don't just taste the strongest thing in a dish usually. You taste all of the things in a dish. And so when you've got bay leaves in there, they might not be the first thing you taste. They might not even be the thing you taste most conspicuously. You know, if there's chili in there or ginger or something like that, then you're going to taste that first perhaps. But it's almost like this is a background flavour that doesn't die away as quickly as some stronger flavours might. And thinking about how you put flavours together for a dish, that's probably quite an important thing to have. You can have punchy, distinctive flavours, but they're kind of like little pinnacles of flavour standing out on their own. And bay leaves are the terrain of the flavour that the other flavours kind of poke out from, if that metaphor makes any sense. So why do people say it doesn't have any flavour? Well, I think most likely they're using old, dried out, expired bay leaves. These are leaves from a plant. The flavours in there are volatile oils, terpenes. They're things that have an expiry. The moment you pick that leaf, the clock is ticking. The flavours are disappearing. And so, yeah, if you're using a beige, crumbly bay leaf that you found at the back of your cupboard, then I'm not surprised it has no flavour. But if you use fresh bay leaves or recently dried bay leaves, there are flavours there. And yeah, see, now I'm just getting a little bit of almost like licorice type of sweetness. That didn't come out earlier. Like I say, it's not strong at all. But this is an important thing to know about flavours. Not all good flavours are powerful flavours. Subtle and ever-present is also an important part of the overall flavour of a dish you might cook. I don't know what the potential health benefits might be of bay leaf tea, but I actually like that enough to want to drink that as a tisane. And every sip reinforces that upwelling of broad but subtle flavours. So yeah, bay leaves do have a flavour. If you don't believe me, get some fresh bay leaves, try what I've just done. And I think most importantly, once you've done that, once you've tasted bay leaves and what they actually are doing, you will probably be able to recognise when they've been used in a casserole or a soup or something like that. You'll be able to recognise what they're contributing to that dish. So we're on a Ryanair flight to Spain. I'm with my sister and she suggested we have creamy butterscotch, but I've got an alternative. Soup drops. You want to try a soup drop, Julie?
Why not? What would you recommend?
The tomato one is the most fruity, but really, I'm not sure I can recommend any of them.
I think I'm going to try, I'm just going to go rogue and see what I get. Do you think that's chicken or beef?
I think that's chicken. I'm going to have tomato. Okay, thoughts?
That is so weird. It's like gravy granules with sweetener in it.
I thought it tasted a bit like those rice crackers. You know those Japanese rice crackers?
Yeah, maybe that's what I need to be thinking.
Yeah. Good. Well, don't throw up on me. So I had a lot of trouble photographing this plant. We picked it up in a garden centre here in Matheron, and it can't be photographed. I'm not sure how purple this looks on the screen, but I guarantee it's more purple in real life. Spanish insect Frenemy. This is a bug of some kind, and when I say a bug I mean a true bug, a hemipteran of some sort, a bug as in what an entomologist would call a bug. I have a feeling this is called a firebug. When I lived in Cyprus as a child, we used to call these ladybird ants, even though they're not ladybirds or ants. But there we go.
insect frenemy of the day. Frenemy because I think if I pick that up it might bite, or actually I think they've got piercing mouth parts, these types of insects, but I think it might either bite me or possibly exude some sort of noxious chemical. Red and black like this is typically a warning colour saying don't mess with me, I can hurt you. So yeah, there we go. I'll get you a close-up picture of it.
So morning of our last day here in Spain, for this visit at least, and it looks like a beautiful morning, unless you look that way. That's quite a threatening sky. I have a feeling that's going to interrupt our morning walk. And it's coming towards us as well. It may shed all of its rain on the opposite side of these hills though. So yeah, if I look over there, you can actually see the precipitation falling as snow high up and then melting to rain, and it's being blown that way by an air current below the clouds. The clouds are moving slowly from left to right in this shot, so the weather that's over there to our left is coming here. Now, I've mentioned many times before in videos shot from this location that the weather sometimes goes round this little valley. There's a little, like a bowl of hills all the way round, and sometimes the weather just sheds its rain on the other side of the hills, and this valley stays dry. The rain is falling from quite high up, so it's falling as snow up there in the clouds initially, and then melting and falling as rain. And so it's being kind of draped across the whole landscape. So over there the hills are already obscured by what appears to be mist, but it's probably rain falling. I'm starting to see a slight mistiness between us and these hills up here, which I think means that the front of that rain is just heading down the valley now. I'll stay out here with the camera and see if we get some rainfall in a minute or two. The weather can be a bit hard to read in this location, so I could just be completely wrong. But yeah, even while I've been speaking, the mistiness between me and those hills has thickened. I think that's rain falling. It does mean that we should experience a rainbow, because I think the sun is going to stay underneath the clouds over there. So that'll be a thing. While we wait for that rain to happen or not, it is just lovely being out here. The hills look so dramatic in these grazing light conditions like this early morning light, especially with a little bit of mist in the air to really reinforce the depth of the scene here. It's just nice to see these conditions, just nice to see this. We're about to lose the sunlight actually, so that rainbow may not happen after all. Well, it may be that I read that all wrong. We haven't had the rainfall. It didn't get as far as here. I think it's mostly shedding on the other side of those hills, as I've mentioned before. I don't know if there's still rain right up there that's just taking a long time to fall. So far, none of it's fallen on my head. I think this might be another one of these things where over there in the Maderon Valley, in the next valley, north of those hills, so maybe even as close as Maderon town, could be getting a deluge. It looks like we're going to stay dry here. I mean, take everything I just said with a pinch of salt. Sometimes you think you can read the weather and you can't. It's possible that some of this stuff we're seeing falling out the bottom of the clouds is just evaporating on the way back down and forming more clouds. Yep, it's now brightening up. It does look like, even though I can see rain falling over there, it's falling the other side of the hills. So yeah, the rain in Spain, something, something, something.
Here's something interesting to try. Kizandi. These two little tins of sweets I picked up in Alicante Airport on the way back from Spain recently. I think we got them in WH Smith's actually, near the deli and CIA. I assume that was a deli and CIA. I'm more of a fan of charcuterie and FBI personally. But anyway, yeah, we picked these up, I think, in Smith's. My sister had been looking for these for a while because she brought some back on the previous trip and gave them to her daughter, my niece, who reportedly says they are the best sweets she's ever tasted. So I think there's probably an easier way of doing it. Oh, there is a tear strip there actually. I'm being stupid. So I thought I'd buy a couple of tins myself just to see what all the fuss was about. Oh, that's interesting. Right, maybe that wasn't meant to happen. Anyway, so yeah, these are much beloved by Lydia. Hi Lydia and Ed. I hope you're having a good day. Sugar-free pastels with sweeteners. Ingredients: sweeteners E420, E955, E950, flavour enhancer E330 and E296, natural flavouring and flavouring. So yeah, it's a little tin. Oh, that's interesting. There's ingredients printed on the tin underneath there that are different, at least slightly expressed differently. Probably that's an English tin and that's a Spanish label, so it might be slightly different things. Anyway, so this is sour pomegranate flavour, pomegranate sours, I beg your pardon, and this is peach sours. And actually, even though I haven't opened the tin, I can smell these already. So there is some intense flavour in there. But anyway, let's get them both open. Yeah, you can see there's a different set of ingredients there. Ingredients: sorbitol, E420, natural and artificial flavours, malic acid, E296. It's not even the same numbers. Not the same, well, not the same list anyway, not expressed exactly the same. Anyway, I'm going to taste them. Let's start. Oh, look, they are like weird drugs. And they say Kiz on them, which, if you have ever read a short story called Enemy Mine, means something quite different. Anyway, this is pomegranate sours. Let's give it a taste. Okay. Kind of chalky, like love hearts. Weird flavour. Certainly, everyone has different tastes, but those are not the best candy I've ever eaten. Well, yeah, I don't know what it is I'm tasting there, but I can taste something almost cheesy. Perhaps the peach sours will be different. These ones, interestingly different. Those have got little brown spots. Those haven't. I wonder if that's why they taste cheesy. Maybe I shouldn't have eaten those. Anyway, let's give the peach sours a taste. Not my favourite thing. I mean, these are okay. They taste a little bit soapy fragrance. I don't know if you can tell, I'm not really enjoying these. So, sorry Lydia and Ed, I don't like your favourite thing. Isn't it a wonderful thing that we're not all the same? I am a little bit worried about these though, because are they supposed to be like that? Speckled with little brownish speckles? I don't think they are. I think I might have eaten mouldy sweets here, because those, like I say, they had a weird cheesy flavour to them. These did not. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had Kazandi pomegranate sours. Are they supposed to have brown spots? I don't think they probably are. Nice little tins though. And that was, I suppose, a mini-sode of stuff in a insufficiently weird can. They've got embossed lips on them. They are kind of weird cans. Well, there you go. And that's all I have to say about that. Kind of inspired by that Progresso chicken noodle soup that I featured on Weird Stuff in a Can a couple of weeks ago. The soup wasn't the weird thing, by the way. I'm going to make some chicken noodle soup. Not a variety of soup that I frequently make. We do make chicken and vegetable soups, but not very often chicken noodle. So what I've got here is the bones and pan deglaze from roasting half a dozen chicken leg portions. A couple of bay leaves, because we know what those do now. Little sprig of sage, little sprig of thyme. Just get the bits out of that box, no point wasting that. Just enough water to cover those bones. So this is the vessel for my pressure cooker. That will make some really nice stock. So the stock program is an hour. We'll just start that and wait. Okay, that's done. Straining setup here is 2 strainers. That one keeps this one up out the way. It also tends to catch smaller bits of stuff. That lot will be strained through there. There's no actual meat left on these bones, but these gelatinous knuckles, I'll save a couple of those because Eva loves those in her dinner. So that lot will just go in the municipal food waste bin. I could grind up the bones and put them in the compost or in the garden. I don't tend to do that. And that's the chicken stock. So that I'll allow to cool and then we'll refrigerate it. And that's what is going to be the basis of the chicken noodle soup. I'm going to make my own noodles to go in this soup. So for this we got 1 medium egg, Burford Browns, my favourite. And I've got 85 grams of strong white flour, that's bread flour. I may not actually use all of that. Well, most of it. And then see how we go. I'm not going to put this through a pasta machine or anything, so I don't need to make it really dry. This is going to be noodles to go in soup. And interestingly, noodles. So in the UK, the term noodles does tend to mean the long, thin, strand type boiled dough. I think I already knew that in the USA, the term noodles is a broader term and tends to encompass, tends to be synonymous with what we would term pasta in the UK, or at least in somewhat overlapping, significantly overlapping. It tends to encompass any kind of boiled dough, regardless shape. Certainly in the UK it's uncommon for people to refer to things like macaroni as noodles. We would just call that macaroni pasta, probably. I'm sure exceptions exist to that. I'm sure there are people who do. So yeah, the noodles in that Progresso soup were just squares of what I would call pasta, but those are termed noodles in the broader category definition in the USA. Yeah, I think we need all of that flour, maybe a bit more, but I'm just going to keep working that dough just until it won't take any more flour. But like I say, I'm not putting this through a pasta machine, so I don't need to incorporate the maximum amount of flour into it. It only just has to be dry enough that I can roll it out on my silicone working surface. That looks about right. So a little bit of flour. I'll let that rest in the fridge, covered, and we'll get that out when we're ready to make the soup. Now I'm not intending to kind of slavishly replicate that Progresso soup, so I'm going to put some leek in my soup because chicken and leek is a fantastic combination anyway. So I'm going to have one of my perpetual leeks. Just cut it just below ground, and we take that bit, the root stays in the soil and regrows. And I know it does that because that one, this one have already been cut once this year. And there's nothing special about these leeks. They're not a variety that's tailored for this. These were just leeks that we forgot about, but I'm deciding to grow them as the perennials they are. The leek's going to need a thorough wash. Just get the straggly ends off there, and then split it right down the middle. It'll probably come apart when I rinse it, actually, because I haven't picked the white part. So I'll just accept the, I've just got to wash that dirt out of there. Which is easy enough to do once it's split like this. It only tends to collect at that point there, where the green leaf meets the tight bit. This bit here, where it was tight, you know, tight packed, tends to stay completely clean. When I roasted the chicken legs, I tipped off some of the fat. So this is chicken fat here. I'm going to use this for frying the leeks. They're not going to need a lot of frying. In fact, most of the stuff that's going to go in this soup is going to need minimal cooking. The leeks will just need to be softened a little bit, and frying them just drives some of the harsher garlic aromas off of green leeks like this. So those will go in now, even though the oil is not sizzling hot. And I'm just going to soften them until they're translucent, and then the stock will go in. Okay, and I've just cut one carrot up into really nice thin slices. I've cut them thin so they won't take long to cook. That can go in the pan with the leeks. I'm going to have a tiny bit of ginger in there as well. This is fresh ginger. It's a little bit withered, just that much. Yeah, so this is quite a shriveled little end of ginger. And I don't want a lot of ginger in there. I just want a little hint of the flavour. Okay, that can go in with the vegetables too. There's my noodle dough. It is still quite soft, so I suspect we're going to need a fair bit of flour here to roll it out. And I think it will probably absorb a bit more of this flour, and we'll need to put some flour on there to keep it from sticking to itself before it goes in the soup. And this loose flour, though, will just thicken the soup ever so slightly as it cooks. So that seems about right. Just going to let that rest for a moment. It is shrinking back a bit, so I'm going to let it rest. We'll roll it again. It's gone quite thin already. We're not looking for fine noodles here. We're going to cut this into diamond shapes or something. So I'll just go like that. And then like that. And so we are going for the not British English interpretation of noodles here, but that's what I fancy. And actually those will, since it's going to be eaten, the soup is going to be eaten with a spoon, this does make a bit more sense. So a bit more flour just to stop those from sticking to each other until it's time for them to go in. Chicken and thyme is a good combo, so we'll have a little pinch of my Spanish thyme in there. And then before any of these vegetables start browning, I'm going to get some of this chicken stock in there. And there is a reason for, there's always a reason, but there is a reason why I'm ladling it in there instead of pouring it. When we get down to the bottom of this jug, we're going to find that what's down there doesn't look quite so nice. So I'm going to stop there. So yeah, down here we've got the little bits of chicken and stuff that came in. That won't go to waste. Eva can have that on her dinner. So that's the chicken and stock. It does need seasoning. So it's going to need a little bit of salt, but I think I'm going to have my salt together with some glutamates to enhance that chicken flavour. So this is yeast extract, off-brand Marmite, about half a teaspoonful. That's going to give us salt, but also glutamates, so the savoury side of things. Now is a good time to taste for seasoning. It does just need a bit more salt. Now that's on a rolling boil, I'm just going to reduce the heat a bit, and my noodles can go in. They cook really quick, and they float up when they're cooked, so actually they take almost seconds to cook. I mean, are those noodles or are those dumplings? Is there a difference? Argue about that in the comments. This is the chicken I pulled off of those bones yesterday when we roasted the chicken legs. And so I'm going to shred it a little bit first. So just the knife through it a couple of times like that, just to cut those long shreds into pieces. And that's going in the soup. So chicken in there. And the noodles are pretty much done at this point. I'm just going to taste one. Nice sort of chewy, slightly doughy, but another little taste for seasoning. I'm also adding some corn. But again, this is hardly going to take any cooking. And in a moment we can pretty much turn off this heat just as soon as that corn has had a minute or two to cook. But we do need a bit more salt. It's surprising how much flavour those noodles do actually soak up. So lid on while that comes to a simmer. Let that corn just cook through briefly, and then we're ready to serve. Chicken noodle soup or chicken dumpling soup? I don't know what you want to call it. I think these are a bit more like dumplings. It's not there's no leavening in that flour. It's just the egg and the steam that's puffed them up a bit. But there we go. I'm just going to go and serve Jenny hers. She's got a nice hunk of buttered bread with that. Back in a moment for the tasting. So for me, just a little bit of black pepper, tiny sprinkle of chili flakes. Just give that a little taste. Let's get a bit of chicken and noodle, a bit of the broth. Really good. And there is no substitute for homemade stock made from chicken bones. Just adds such a lot of richness to a dish. I mean, stock cubes are great, but you can't replicate the flavour and actually also the texture that you get from homemade stock. So I don't have a cold, but I imagine if I did, that would be really comforting and healing. That tiny little bit of ginger, the chili, the pepper, just the lusciousness of the chicken stock, just all of those lovely, gentle but nourishing flavours. It's really hearty and warming. It's the middle of February and I've just been out and picked a big bunch of crow garlic. So I'm going to prepare this for preservation, most of it, and some of it I'm going to use right now. This is all a lot like chives, so if I try to wash that in a colander, I'm just going to make a mess of it. So what I'm actually going to do here is run some water into this bag, tuck those ends down, and give it a good shake. And then I can drain off the water, and I'll repeat that several times. Crow garlic is a wild species of onion, or garlic, Allium vineale, that grows abundantly here in Great Britain. It's especially common at the coast, but you can find it just about everywhere where there's a bit of rough grass, really. It looks like grass, but it has a slightly blue-green tinge to it. You do need to be careful picking what you think is onions in spring, because there are lots of other things growing that look similar, and some of them are poisonous. Rather than try and describe all of that in this video, there is another video where I go into that in great detail, linked in this card and in the video description. Anyway, I think I probably put too much on the board there. All I'm going to do with this is just go through and pick off little bits like that where it's just dead at the end. I'm also just going to make sure I haven't picked anything that isn't crow garlic in here. I was pretty judicious when I gathered this. It grows in bunches. It's not difficult to pick just the thing you want, but I will just run my eyes across it again just to make sure we haven't got any foreign objects in here. You know, spring leaves that might be poisonous or just otherwise undesirable. I suppose the most likely thing you're going to gather accidentally along with this is grass, which won't do you any great harm if you were to eat it. Now I'm just going to chop this up quite finely, and it resembles chives and can be used in pretty much any way you might use chives. Flavour's different. I found that every different species of allium has its own subtle differences in flavours and aroma. Crow garlic has got a flavour that reminds me of when you walk past an Italian restaurant and they're starting a dish and they're frying the garlic. It's got that kind of developed garlic aroma, almost like garlic that's been slightly cooked, or, you know, like the black garlic you can get as well. That sort of intense but not harsh garlic flavour. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to describe flavours. So, you know, this is one of the reasons to get out there and taste things, is I can try to describe this using the wrong words, but I can't really tell you what this is actually going to taste like. I can only approximate it by comparing it to things. Okay, so that's all chopped up like that. and that's just going to go into this box. And so on. And that will just go in the freezer. I'll just put a lid on that. That will go in the freezer. You can use it straight from frozen because these will freeze more or less loose. You can just pick a handful out, or, you know, dig some out with a spoon. Use them straight from frozen. Oh yeah, but it's like a fresh green garlic plus slight tang of savoury cooked garlic, even though it's not cooked yet. So yeah, I'm just going to carry on doing that. Like I say, gonna just go through, pick off the bits that look a little bit less pleasant and get it all chopped down. And here's why I'm checking through it in smallish batches, because here's something I don't want to eat. Green caterpillar. I think that can go out in the garden. Okay, so there's the yield. I think that's more than 100 grams there. That's quite a lot of crow garlic. I'm not going to freeze all of that. I'll just set aside a little portion. And I'm going to cook that in an omelette. That's quite a bit for a one-person omelette, but I do want to taste it. The majority of it though, is going to go in the freezer. Right, so bit of butter in a pan. I've already cooked something in this pan. I'll show you what that is in just a moment. So my crow garlic, perhaps not quite as much as I thought I was going to put in actually, but that will be fine. Okay, some cheese. I'm just going to take that off the heat a little bit to cook it a bit more gently. Okay. Something like that. And I'm going to stop before that gets completely frazzled. All right, and then, so there's my omelette. And to go with this, a couple of slices of nice black pudding, fried tomato halves, and some toasted homemade bread. Let's have a look at this omelette. Yes. So, now, not everyone likes their omelettes like this. You might be thinking that's runny, uncooked egg there. It's not. That's a sauce that the egg has made together with the cheese. That's what I was aiming for. If you like your omelettes better done than that, more power to you. But yeah, saucy omelette, my favourite. And the crow garlic, just one of the best flavours of early spring foraging. Here's something a little bit different. These are Indian small bananas, elaichi bananas. I don't think I've tried these before. I was in a South Indian supermarket today, just buying a few things, and I saw these, and I thought I'd give them a try. They are quite ripe, but I like a ripe banana, so hopefully we'll be okay. So let's have a look. Really, really thin skins. I mean, sometimes that is the case with bananas as they get more ripe anyway. But, as I understand it, this variety of banana has very thin skins anyway. So there we go. I would say it feels a little bit more moist than a typical banana would be. But actually, now that I've broken it in half, that looks a bit drier than a typical banana. It smells ever so slightly acidic, a bit like the smell of yogurt maybe. I don't know if that might mean that they're fermenting a bit, but I don't think so. They look just nicely ripe. Let's give it a try. Interesting flavour. Not intensely banana. There's a slight acidity to it. Softer and more glutinous. You know, a little bit slimy, if you wanted to use the word, than a typical UK supermarket banana. There's a couple of interesting subtle flavour notes in there. One is a kind of appley fruitiness, and the other one is a nutty, not quite chocolatey, but nutty, slightly earthy flavour. Maybe a little bit like hazelnuts or something. really interesting and different. And I like different. Insect friend and a real harbinger of spring here. Peacock butterfly. This butterfly will have rested all winter as an adult possibly in my woodshed. And it's come out now, the weather's warmed up a little bit, and it's feeding on a periwinkle here. But yeah, real herald of spring, that one. Welcome to the comment positivity section. This is just like the opposite of reacting to hater comments. I'm going to pick out some comments that made me smile, perhaps asked interesting questions, or just contributed to the generally uplifting feel of the comment section under the videos on my channel. Let us begin with a whole lot of comments on the Faux series, where I tried to make a fake, or my own version of a Faux tinned pie so that I could make a Faux tarte tatin. So, honest question this shrimp, but if Faux ever did start making tarte tatin or pineapple upside down cake due to somebody at Faux seeing one of these vids, yours looked amazing by the way, well done on the whole process, do you think you would have a case for copyright? Not sure of the correct legal terminology. Would you ever think about selling these? Obviously not on a manufacturing scale, but as a little sideline, like someone would sell cakes via a little cake stand. Or do you think there'd be too much red tape due to the canning process? Would be a shame if you didn't, because it looks superb. Well, thank you for your kind feedback for a start. But yeah, I don't think you can copyright ideas. You can copyright, you can trademark, you can legally protect implementations of an idea, but generally you can't copyright or patent a pure idea as such. As it stands, I don't mind if Faux actually wanted to start making a tarte tatin without giving me any credit. They don't have to give me credit. I won't mind at all. We know where it started, really, don't we? Because that video exists. But yeah, I don't mind if people want to take my ideas and make them into a commercial product. Doesn't bother me at all. As long as they don't then want me to take the video down because it infringes their product, that would be bad. But if the video is prior art to the product release, I don't think there's very much risk of that. I don't generally commercialize any of the stuff that I make. Quite often when I do a little project and I make a thing, like my little drink can tin work thing up there, people often say to me, oh, you should make those and sell them. And it's a good idea. Certainly it is a good idea. But for me to focus on making those in quantity and then finding a way to sell them, and sell them at a profit as well, which might not necessarily be possible. I mean, can I sell that for an amount that's worth the time it took me to make it? I don't know. But anyway, that's a time-consuming thing. And I've got a head full of other ideas I want to be pursuing in other videos. So I'm perfectly happy for anybody to take ideas from my video, turn them into products, turn them into craft products, sell them. I don't require a commission. I don't even require credit, but it's nice if you want to. Feel free to take any of my ideas and run with them. That's what they're for. Ideas want to be free. And so that's part of the reason I'm publishing videos, is I've got to get these ideas out of my head so that maybe other people might want to do something with them. But yeah, for me to try to commercialize one of those items and turn it into a product that I sell, I have done that in the past. It's just very time consuming, and it steals time from the pursuit of other ideas and inventions. So I don't typically do it. Next one. Question I have so far is, are any of these things something you'd do again, or was it simply an experiment? I've often tried things and they've worked so well they've become incorporated into real world applications. I'm not sure. Probably not. I don't know that I would want to make a tinned pie unless I'm trying to do it for this particular reason. And pineapple upside down cake, although it was okay in the tin, it's just as easy to bake in an open cake tin and then turn out. So there's not really a reason to do it in a tin other than experimenting to see if it could be a canned product, which is what we were trying to do in that little mini series. As far as ideas that happen in my videos, some of them do actually make it into my everyday routine. So some of my batch cooking type of things I do again and again after first demonstrating them or first experimenting with them in a video. And some of the things I discover in the budget cooking or the cooking challenge series do become routine for me. But it is generally the case that a lot of the stuff I do in videos, I'm doing it because I've got an idea in my head and I need to get it out of my head, and so that I can start thinking about other things. I get ideas stuck in my head and I have to exorcise them by saying, okay, well, I'll just do it and then we'll find out whether it works. We'll stop wondering and try. And stop wondering and try has become increasingly a theme for me in recent years. Just, I am plagued with ideas, and so stop wondering and try is the way to get those ideas out of my head so I can free up a little bit of capacity to think about something else, often the next idea. So it's not always freedom from that predicament, but that's where a lot of these things come from. That's why I do a lot of the things I do on this channel, is just really to get them out of my head. On the Fray Bentos pie series, few people said words to the effect, you should have published this on Pie Day, which was the day after the second episode of my Faux Bentos series. I actually published the first episode in that series in British Pie Week. We don't really have Pie Day here in the UK because Pie Day, the third 3/14, only works in American date formats. I have done a video on Pie Day about American apple pie a year or two ago, but yeah, we don't write our dates in that format. So we don't write month, day, year. We write day, month, year. And so there is no Pie Day because that would have to be the third day of the 14th month. See if you can figure out why that isn't possible. So yeah, we don't really have Pie Day, but we do have British Pie Week, which is a whole week of notionally the celebration of pies. And I thought to mark Pie Week, I would release the first episode of my Faux Bentos mince and vegetable pie in a can video for British Pie Week. So that's why that was when it was, and why it wasn't on Pie Day, because Pie Day is not kind of a thing. On the same series, can someone please tell me what the difference is between French and British butter? So the difference is French butter comes from France and British butter comes from Britain. No, seriously though, a lot of French butter producers culture the cream. They, like yogurt or kefir or those sorts of things, they ferment the cream with cultures a little bit before they churn it to make the butter. As a result, the butter tastes, it brings out the kind of dairy flavors in the butter. And so the butter, French butter that's been made from fermented cream, and it will say so on the ingredients usually, it will say that it includes starter cultures, but the French butter that's been made in that way just tastes incredibly buttery. I know that sounds weird because butter tastes of butter, but when I taste French butter, I remember what butter is supposed to taste like. A lot of commercial supermarket cheap butter that we get in the UK is fine. It's butter. It's made from churned cream. It's butter fat. It can be a little bit mild, and that's fine in a lot of contexts. But for a really, really buttery taste, you want a butter that's been made from cultured cream. And there are some producers that do that in this country now. And perhaps I will seek out some of those butters and give them a taste. But yeah, that's the key difference. When I talk about French butter versus English butter, I'm actually talking about cultured butter versus plain butter that's just made from fresh, uncultured cream. Bet you didn't know Fray Bentos is a town in Uruguay. Well, sorry, but I did. We talk about that quite a lot on the Discord, actually, and it's come up numerous times in conversation around the Fray Bentos appearance in Weird Stuff in a Can. So Fray Bentos is a town in Uruguay. It means Brother Benjamin or Benedict or something, and it's named after a monk. It's a major town on the border, really, with Argentina, and it used to be a big processing center for canned foods, for canned meat especially. So South America, that part of South America produces a lot of beef. And so corned beef, tinned corned beef, was a product from that region. And there's a huge canning factory there, which was the Fray Bentos canning factory. But then over time, the brand detached from the location. I think the factory is still there, but it's owned by a different company now. And some of it, I think, is a museum. So yeah, the brand Fray Bentos took on a life of its own and became the name of this product range, which has evolved over time to include tinned pies, but originally it was tinned corned beef, I think, and probably other beef products. Yeah, I did know about that, but thank you for mentioning it. On the same subject, I think the 2 million subscriber video should be shrimp flying to Uruguay to eat a Fray Bentos in the town of Fray Bentos. I would actually love to go there. That would be a fantastic trip. And I think Uruguay is one of the safer and easier to travel to countries in South America for a complete travel novice like myself. I think it would probably be a thing. It would be better if I had a guide or something to take me around and see the place. But Fray Bentos, it is an industrial town in South America, but it looks like quite a nice place. And I'm sure it's full of very lovely and interesting people and stories. One really interesting thing, though, is that if you go and ask for a meat pie in Fray Bentos, the local meat pie is pastel de carne, which is like meat pie. But pastel de carne in Uruguay is very similar to shepherd's pie. It's minced meat in a rich sauce topped with mashed potato, I think. So that's interesting in itself. I'd love to go to Uruguay. I could actually get to the town of Fray Bentos in 2 flights. The second flight would be a little bit Indiana Jones, I think, or those adventure films where somebody gets on a small plane. But I think it could be an adventure for the future, maybe. I think what would be interesting is to talk to some people from the town of Fray Bentos to try to understand how much awareness they've got about the product range of stuff that's sold in England under the same name as the town where they live. That would be an interesting conversation. It would probably be a rude thing to just walk up to people in the street and ask about, but perhaps there would be a context in which people could, I could interview people and ask them about their perception of and how they feel about the fact that their town name has been hijacked to become the name of a range of mediocre meat pies. Anyway, that's an idea for the future. I'm not going to start a Kickstarter. Don't imagine I'm going to launch a Kickstarter or anything like that to go off and fund a trip to Uruguay. At the moment, it's just a pipe dream, so don't get your hopes up. But one day maybe. It is a fine idea. Still on the pies, future sign suggestion, Pie Hard 2, Pie Harder. I absolutely love that, and I am totally stealing that for some iteration of pie stuff in the future. Perhaps the Pie Harder is an apt title for where I try to, using my Fray Bentos technique, I try to say, okay, well, what I've done is I've replicated the way Fray Bentos pies come out, but can I make them better? Can I actually make a canned pie that performs better than a Fray Bentos pie? Because there are shortcomings in the way Fray Bentos pies perform. We all know that, right? So Pie Harder could be where I try to make the Fray Bentos pie that actually works and provides a decent quality pie. But I am stealing that title, definitely. Thank you. There is Apfelstrudel and Sachertorte in cans. Now, this is interesting because this happens quite a lot on my videos where I talk about canned pies. I talk about Fray Bentos being the only canned pie these days. And quite a lot of people say, no, that's not true. You can get these other pies. And when I go searching for them, I can't find them. I can't find a single trace of them. The really common ones is people refer to brands that used to exist in this country that they presumably think are still in production, but aren't. Like Prince's canned pies. They're not a thing anymore. Prince's stopped making canned pies. The Fray Bentos brand went to Baxter's from Prince's, and so canned pies are not made under the Prince's brand anymore. There might be some new old stock somewhere, but it has been quite a few years since those were made. So it might be more of a job for one of those YouTubers that opens things that are very expired. Ashens, perhaps. The other one is Goblin meat puddings. And again, these little steamed puddings, Goblin brand, used to be a thing. A lot of people, I think they're still out there, but unfortunately they're not. They went out of production quite a long time ago. They did experience a very brief revival, and I think that might have been just under some labelling thing. I think they might have been the same as the Fray Bentos meaty puds in little plastic tubs. But again, Goblin brand of canned meat puddings, not in existence at the moment. And yeah, as I say, that happens quite a lot. People say, oh yeah, but there are these other brand of canned pies, or you can get this kind of canned pie in somewhere. In this case, Apfelstrudel and Sachertorte in cans. I can't find it. So I am all for trying. I'm not saying don't say this. What I'm saying is, please send me links. Send me links to where I can get the products, and I will feature them in a video. Still on the canned stuff, a week ago someone suggested Shrimp make this same video, but I see by the chronometer on Mike's thumb he already had the video in the can, as it were. So yeah, that's correct. The Faux Bentos series I did actually record a month or two before publishing, and at that point I was still covering up that unsightly bruise in my thumbnail with nail varnish or plasters or tape or something. That's all healed up now very nicely. There's just a little dent on the end that's just about to grow off. Anyway, on to drink can tin work. Have you seen the guy that folds geometric shapes into whole uncut cans? Yeah, I have, and it's fascinating. And I had a go at it, and I'm hopeless at it. But yeah, there's this other drink can tin work craft where people take whole cans and, using mostly their fingernails, I think, just press and fold and form the cans into the most amazing shapes without stretching the material, just literally by manipulating folds in the material. They get these really amazing sculpted end products. I'll put a few of them on the screen. I will link to some places where you can see people doing that as well, because it's really fascinating. But I tried that myself with one of the really simple ones, which is just the stacked cubes, and it kind of worked, but it wasn't even good enough to show anyone. Have you tried filling the recessed side of the embossed metal with colour? Nail polish perhaps, to create an enamel-like effect. I think that would work pretty well on here actually. So I think they might be talking about filling in the little concave side of the engraving. But I think also if you make shapes with hollow centres, so circles or squares or triangles, I think you could probably flood them with some kind of enamel type of paint and have quite a pretty coloured design. I did do something a bit like that. I made a do not disturb sign for my front door, actually, no cold callers, but not in a video. That was on a thing on my website years and years ago. Here's a picture of it though. So yeah, I think there's potential for painting these cans. The other thing you can do is spray them and then rub it back so that the raised bits come through. So you end up with a field of colour with the embossed pattern showing through as silver. Random parsnip comment. So I was talking in the previous random stuff, I was talking about I bought a whole load of parsnips on special offer because they were nearly expired, and I was processing them. I was talking about peeling them all in one go and then chopping them all in one go so that you don't have to keep on picking up and putting down tools. And somebody very rightly commented, also, every time you switch tools, you're more likely to drop a tool. So there is a safety angle as well as efficiency. So every time you pick up a knife, that's an opportunity to slip and drop it. So yeah, it makes sense to, when you're doing a big batch of something, to optimize those operations for safety as well as efficiency. While we're on the subject of that, actually, that reminds me, there are two things in the kitchen, two rules that I have related to knives in the kitchen that I observe very, very strictly. The first one is I never put a sharp knife in the washing up bowl. So the little paring knives I use, or my big chefy knife, any kind of sharp knife, like a steak knife even, anything that's got a blade that would easily cut me, so not usually a table knife, so the knives and forks we eat at the table, you could saw them on your skin and nothing happens. They're actually quite blunt. They're for dividing food more than cutting it. Anyway, so yeah, rule number one is I never put a sharp knife into the washing up water. So often when I'm cooking or something like that, I will have a bowl of washing up water there because I clean as I go if I can. But also if you see me taste something with a spoon, so if you see me taste for seasoning, that spoon usually goes straight into the washing up water. And then if I want to taste again, I get a fresh spoon. Just out of habit, actually, it doesn't really matter that much. If you're doing it in a commercial or catering context, you never put a spoon that's been in your mouth back into the food that is then going to be served to somebody else, even if you're cooking it. It's just a practice you don't do. And so out of habit from having worked in a little bit of catering context, I tend to use a fresh spoon every time I'm tasting now. It doesn't matter at home because everybody's got the same germs in this house, and as I say, you are cooking it a bit further anyway. Where was I? A spoon from tasting for seasoning goes straight into the washing up water. A knife that I've been slicing onions never goes in the washing up water because it's got suds on the top of the water. If you stick your hands into the bowl and the knife just happens to be sitting with the sharp side upwards, well, I've learned that lesson from doing it wrong, is the truth, from having put a sharp knife into the washing up, or actually having somebody else put a sharp knife into the washing up without me knowing, plunge my hands into the water and slice my fingers quite badly. So now I have a rule that those sharp knives never go into the water unless I'm holding the handle. So the sharp knives stay on the side, and then when I'm washing up, I don't let go of the handle of the knife while I'm washing the sharp bit. That's rule number one, and it has served me well. Since I've done that, I've not had any of those horrible cuts that you get on your hands from sharp knives in the washing up. Rule number two takes a little bit of mental preparation, which is, and it's a really, again, it's a common one that you hear in catering context, is if you drop something, step back. So mentally prepare yourself that if you drop something, don't try to catch it. Don't try to cushion its fall to the floor by getting your foot underneath it. Take a step back. Allow it to fall. That does mean the floor might get damaged. That does mean a glass might break. It does mean a knife blade might get chipped if it falls on the floor. But if you try to catch something when it's falling, you will almost certainly grip it harder than you should. And if it's a falling knife, that can lead to some really, really horrible injuries. And so I have kind of trained myself and established the habit of, if I drop something, take a step back in the kitchen and just allow it to fall. It doesn't reduce the risk to zero because it might still bounce and stick in your leg or something like that, but it does de-risk it quite a bit. So those are my two knife rules for the kitchen. Is one, knives don't go in the washing up water unless I'm holding them. And two, if you drop something, take a step back. Anyway, hey there, Shrimp. I'm just wondering, are you ever going to put up the acoustic foam panels in the background of Shrimp's studio? I'm sure he would appreciate that. These foam panels here, in fact. The answer is no, I'm not, because these are just in storage here. I use these when I'm doing a bit of recording on my microphone setup over there. I build a little tent out of this foam around the microphone just to deaden some of the sound reflections off the back wall and the monitor and everything that's there. So I build a little makeshift tent around my microphone. So no, I'm not going to put those up on the wall because they are only here because they're in storage. But thank you for asking. So on the ration pack thing now, where I made a ration pack based on what I could buy in supermarkets. Somebody said, perhaps you could revisit this challenge with a homemade vibe. You could use your dehydrator to dehydrate a prepared meal and make homemade crackers in the oven for snacks. That's a really interesting idea, and I think I should try that. I haven't done a lot of cooking with a view to preserving meals or preserving foods for future consumption. I've got a dehydrator. What I have done is dehydrated ingredients. So dehydrate mushrooms or apples or something to use as ingredients in cooking. But what I haven't really ever done very much of is trying to dehydrate and make shelf-stable foods that are entire meals or entire dishes. And that's an interesting idea. I don't have a freeze dryer and they're expensive and bulky, so I'm not going to be probably getting one. But there are other ways to make shelf-stable meals, so perhaps I should give that a try. Thank you for the idea. Still on the Portland one, actually, so talking about the grooves in the stone on the Merchant's Incline and in the railway out to the cliff, I noticed some grooves in the stone, and I thought they'd been worn by the wheels of carts. But actually somebody pointed out, they said, I'd suggest the grooves in the stones in the old railway are probably worn by the cables. And that does make more sense because there wasn't a pair of them at either side of the track. There was kind of one that was mostly in the middle of the track, although it did meander a bit. But then I suppose as the track goes up the hill, the cables might lay in different places, you know, as they go up the hill. So yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I think those grooves in the stones, which you're looking at now on the screen, were probably worn by the cables. Still on the Portland one, is the path as vertiginous as it looks, or is that just an artifact of the camera? Well, actually, interestingly, the opposite. It was worse than it looks. The camera, for some reason, usually makes hills look smaller, slopes look flatter, holes look shallower, and cliffs less precipitous. And so very often it might seem like I'm overreacting in a video when I say, well, I'm not walking along that path because there's a narrow path and it goes along the top of a steep cliff and, you know, great big drop on the side. But it does say that it goes down here. Let's have a look. Blimey. It's a bit cliff toppy down here. I'm not going to take this cliff path here. It's just a bit too windy and the path is really close to the edge. I'm not happy to do that. Might seem like I'm being very risk averse, and I am a bit risk averse. That's how I've lived this long. But usually, if you think I'm overreacting, it's because the camera is for some reason downplaying the whole thing. It's something to do with the wide angle of the lens or something like that. But very often, and it's the same thing when people say, oh, you sound out of breath walking up that tiny hill. And it's not, it's because it wasn't a tiny hill. But also editing exists, and I edited out the bit where it was like 10 minutes of solid uphill walking, and all you're actually listening to is me when I got to the top and I'm out of breath. That's by the by, that's an editing thing, but there is this thing where the camera just seems to make everything look a bit tamer than it really was. So if you thought the cliffs and the steps down and all of those things looked a bit tricky, in reality they were worse. They were more vertiginous than they looked. But interesting question, and yeah, they're not less, they're more. And finally, a question on, I don't know where, but a question about curry powder. So how has British curry powder changed? I'm probably not old enough to know anything other than what we have now. So that is an interesting question. So back in the 1980s or so when I was at school, 1970s, 1980s when I was at school, I remember when they were cooking curry in the home economics classes, the halls would be full of this curry aroma. And at the time, I didn't think I liked curry because of that smell. But as I got a bit older, I got to like it. I got to enjoy it. But there was a particular warm sweetness to the curry aroma of the 1970s and 80s that has mostly gone away. And curry powder now has diversified into a wonderful range of different things. But English curry powder back in those days, it probably was because it wasn't all that genuine. It probably was very mustard forward. Probably had things like fennel seed maybe in it, and celery seed and coriander in different balances. I think a lot of fenugreek as well, probably. But it had a different aroma. And all I can describe it as is a kind of sweet warmth. But yeah, it's very hard to find that particular balance of flavors these days, because curry powders are all trying to be a bit more authentic. They're all trying to be their own thing. You know, they are something specific, which is great. But I do find myself wanting to taste that curry powder flavor, that old-fashioned curry flavor again. Perhaps I need to go on a journey to try to blend my own curry powder from an assortment of different spices and see if I can hit on what the actual thing was with it. That's another idea for a video, I suppose. Trying to not blend any kind of authentic Indian curry powder, but to try to blend an authentic 1970s English curry powder. There was another comment on the tin work which didn't have any words, it only had a link, and it was a link to somebody thanking me for the technique, and they've been doing it for years, and they've actually done their own variation on the technique which achieves a different effect. So I'll link to that video, it's here hopefully, and I'll also just try and describe what it is they've done. So where my tin work process, I emboss once from the back side, and then I trace around the inside and the outside of the lines from the front side, and then I re-emboss from the back side. They only trace around the outside on the front. So they do the first emboss, and then rather than inside and outside, they only do the outside. And that creates raised panelled patterns and lettering that look like this. And I think that's actually quite an interesting technique and worthy of its own exploration. So thank you for that, and thank you for expanding on it, and thank you for enjoying the craft, and thank you for thanking me. But well done for creating your own variation on it, and I think that's really good. I'm really happy to see that. So that's everything for the comment positivity section. I'm gonna do another segment of the video now which not everybody will be interested in, but because it's just me taking apart a piece of tech and fiddling around with it and wittering away at what might be happening and what things might be, and trying to get it working and installing Linux on it. And a lot of people are just going to find that really boring. So if that's you, then feel free to jump out the video now. There is nothing else to miss after this point. If you want to watch me wittering and disassembling and struggling with a underpowered Windows tablet, that's coming up next. This is a Onda V919 Air tablet. It's a Windows tablet. It had Windows 8 on it when I bought it. It doesn't work anymore because the battery is completely dead. It will work when it's attached to power. I'm going to try to open this today because I'm a little bit concerned the battery might be turning into a spicy pillow in there. But also, I want to just see how upgradable it is. It had, like I say, it had Windows 8 on it when I bought it. I upgraded it to Windows 10, and that was a bit of a disaster because I think we ran out of disk space. I think it's only got 64 gigabytes of disk space, and downloading the upgrade was quite problematic. It's got a couple of little screws here. That doesn't look like a... Let's just have a look and see what that actually is. Is it a Torx? It looks like a very small Torx, maybe. Smaller than that. That fits. So there's a couple of screws on the bottom, and I think the rest of it is just a case of very gently prying this front glass away from the casing. Yeah, tiny little screw there. So I don't really know what my plans are for this device, but I just want to take the battery out really and recycle that if it needs it. But you know, it might be that I want to put Linux on this thing. It might be that something in here is upgradable. Actually, I have a feeling the storage might be upgradable. Right, I'm going to start soft. So that's where the screws are. I'll see if I can get a card in there. I don't think there's any glue here. I think it is just a case of don't believe there's any glue in this assembly, but I could be wrong. It might be that I need to heat this up. Let's try a sucker on here and just see if I can get under the corner. Of course, pulling at the corner might not be the best idea, but if something's going to shift, it might be there. It really doesn't want to go in there. I might need to rethink my strategy and warm that up with a hot air gun. Right, yeah, I consulted a number of online guides about this one. There aren't very many teardown instructions, but it turns out, yeah, this is not glued together, it is clipped together with little clips that do come apart, but the process is a bit scary. So we may end up breaking this. I might just put some plastic in there so those don't clip back together. We've also got to be a little bit careful we don't sever ribbon cables that might be sitting there right on the edge. But yeah, it's coming apart there, and it is just clips. And I've just pushed it back together. Don't know how we get around this corner. We'll try the same thing here. A bit of pressure in there just to try to get in, and then pull the clips apart. Gosh, it's probably assembled with the note on the basis that it would only ever be put together and never taken apart. It's not tremendously repairable. Ah, right, okay. We're getting somewhere now. I've got round the corner. So let's just see if we can extend that. Yeah, see, it's these plastic clips. In fact, I think I'm breaking them as we get this apart, but not to worry. I wonder if a little plastic pick thing would be better than trying to use a metal one. No, it really isn't. Got to be really careful here because the screen itself is quite fragile. Let's try going down this side, see if we can get the same thing to happen here. And somewhere along here there will be a very thin ribbon cable for the touchscreen, and probably some other things. So just got to be really careful. Or as careful as possible. There goes another little plastic clip. But it's coming. It's also chewing up the edge of the plastic edge of this screen assembly as well. So, oops. And the clips that are intact, I'm tending to push them back together. Okay. Well, anyway, let us press on. Okay. I think once we get round most of two sides, we're probably going to find that it will just pop out of the frame. There we go. Okay. Can't see any ribbon stuff on this side. It doesn't look like there's very much attached to the back case. So there we go. Yeah. So nothing actually attached to the back case. Here is the inside of the tablet. The batteries look in reasonably good condition physically, but as I say, the thing won't hold a charge. So I was kind of hoping we might find some slots to upgrade various things in here. There's something under here. I think this might be the Wi-Fi module here. Let's just peel that back. All right, okay. Yeah, so there's some little modules, but they're not standard or anything. Those are just connectors. I'm going to put that back down. Okay. So what have we got here? So that's the camera. There's the ribbon cable for the camera module. This is where the power buttons and volume rocker is. That's the micro SD card slot. There weren't very many other ports on this. There is a thing that opened there, and it has a blank for, I think, maybe a SIM card. I think this bit here might have been for probably a 3G modem. There's an unpopulated thing here which might be for additional memory, and I think the CPU and RAM is under there. This is the power connector, and I think we can just pull that out. And I want to just see what happens if I then power this and try and switch it on without the battery connected. Will it boot up without the battery connected? There is a micro USB. Oh, it had micro USB, micro HDMI, and a headphone jack on the bottom. Micro USB is not the best connector, but it is what it is. Okay, so that's that. So that's got some power now. Because I have a feeling the battery was the thing that was stopping it from booting. So the power button was the one nearest the top. So we've got, that's interesting. So we've only got the rocker and the, so there's an additional button there, this one, that is not part of any of this assembly. I wonder if that's a reset button. I'm gonna not press that one, but we'll press this one here. Probably have to long press because it's been sat in storage for a while. Nothing. I'm just going to reconnect that battery thing and see if it'll boot up, because sometimes it would boot up, sometimes it wouldn't. And that was the problem I was having. So we'll try just long press on that with the battery attached. Again, nothing. I'm tempted to press this button. Let's see what that does. Really interesting that there's an extra button that's not exposed. It's probably a reset button, and you probably have to press it in conjunction with this one here. Let's press that with something soft. Well, okay, can't get any life out of that. It may be that the whole thing has to go off for recycling then. That's a shame. I was hoping to use this as part of a Linux project where we take the batteries out, power it directly from something else, and then install a lightweight Linux on here and use it as a terminal for something. I've got an idea for a thing that needs a terminal, but anyway, maybe not. But I might just leave it to charge for a little bit and see what happens. There's no charging light or nothing in evidence. Let's just try booting again. Oh, life. Now the problem with this thing is it's only got one USB port, and so when I was trying to tinker with it, what I really wanted to do was attach a keyboard to it, because it is just an x86, it's like an Atom processor in here or something like that. Oh, here we are. Here we are, Windows 10. So yeah, there's only one USB port, so I could boot this and interrupt the boot and install Linux on it or something, but when the battery's dead, if you plug an on-the-go keyboard in there, if the battery's dead, you can't get it to boot for long enough to go through the installation process. And on-the-go hubs don't necessarily deliver power to the charger at the same time as enabling you to add more peripherals. So the idea was to take this apart, replace this battery with something else. It's 3.8 volts. Easy enough to deliver 3.8 volts, and then make it into the screen of some little terminal or something. Anyway, yes, that's Windows 10 on there, but it's not. Yeah, I think what we'll do is if we unplug this, we'll probably find it has very little battery power, so I'll plug that back in. But the battery just doesn't hold a charge. So I suppose the other thing I could do would be to get some new batteries. Just plug some new batteries in there. Okay, well, managed to get into Windows, and here is the spec for this. So we've got an Intel Atom X5 Z8300 CPU at 1.44 gigahertz, 4 gig of RAM. It's a 64-bit operating system, so that must be one of the later Atom processors that's got 64-bit support. I thought all of the Atoms were 32-bit, but maybe this is a later one. Storage. And we've got 40 gig free. Of course, this is Windows 10, so it's out of support now, so there's there's no chance of updating this. I very much doubt this would run Windows 11. But the battery won't charge beyond 7%. So yeah, we need to do something about that. Oh, and that additional hidden button there definitely is a reset button, because here's what happens when you press it. Immediately, the machine goes back to boot. So that does theoretically mean, yeah, I just need to I just need to get some power into this thing so that I can use the USB port for a keyboard, which means I can interrupt the boot sequence and get it to boot from the micro SD card and install Linux on the storage in here. That's what I think I will do. So this tablet, interestingly, after I disassembled it and disconnected the battery and reconnected the battery does now hold much more of a charge. It charges to 100% and it runs for a couple of hours. So I think the problem was not the battery itself, but probably the battery monitoring on the board. So something on the motherboard is trying to gauge the battery health, and maybe that went adrift from reality, because there's nothing about these batteries that looks particularly unsound. They're not starting to swell or anything. So anyway, I've charged it up. I was thinking about putting it all back together, but I have actually broken some of the plastic clips on, crucially, the plastic clips all along the top here, where the buttons and the SD card slot live. So I can't put it back together, so we are going to have to just go forward rather than back. Anyway, I've charged it up. We're going to try and install Debian on it instead of Windows 10, which is out of support. There is only one USB port. So I've got this thing, which is an on-the-go hub. Then this gives you 3 USB ports and a micro USB port for charging. You can't use those at the same time as this. There's a switch on there, so you can either charge or you can have on the go. So that on the go is just a way of saying that this is a USB port rather than a charging port. However, there should be enough battery capacity to do the installation now. So we'll put that in there. Gosh, yeah, micro USB sometimes feels like it's going to break when you plug it together. So that's in there. We will switch this to on the go. And we'll just see if we can get into the BIOS to start with, because we're going to need to change the boot order and make it boot from USB media. So let's do that. And this is going to be a case of booting it up and then mashing a button, which could be escape, it could be F2, F7 or F10, depending on the type of BIOS that's in here. And as soon as I see the boot logo on here, I need to mash the escape button. Here we go. Right. Oh, it worked. First time. So there we go. We are into the boot menu. And we've got two options. There is no option to boot from USB media, but then there's no USB media plugged in, so perhaps that makes a difference. Let's try booting that again with something else plugged in. Let's do that now, actually. Let's just see. I wonder if it'll pick it up. So on here I've got a 64 gig SD card in a little USB holder, so that's essentially a USB stick. That's got the image for Debian on it. I don't suppose this is going to have picked that up, but let's just have a look and see. Yeah, no, it probably needs to be there at boot. So, okay, I will save and exit. And then, yeah, it's going to go into Windows. So we're going to have to boot this again. And then we'll try that again. But now we've got the media plugged in. So, power on. Mash that button. Interestingly, the power button only seems to turn the device on about 1 time out of every 3. I don't know if that's a physical problem with the button or if there's just a fault with this thing. I've seen a lot of other people say that their device behaves in a similar way. So I imagine it's just some weirdness about the standby mode of this thing. There we go, we've got in there and into, there we go. We're in again. I should have been, I wish I could have shown you that, but I unfortunately had to stand it up to put it on the, to get to the power button. So now, right, okay, so now in the boot options, we've got 3 boot options, and one of them does include the generic storage device. So I'm going to put that as the first boot option, Windows Boot Manager as the second, and no third boot option. Save and exit. And now it should just boot from that USB media. There goes the dog. Oh, loading bootloader. Hey, here we go. by that I mean that. In case you're wondering what that's all about, that's the postie. And Eva wants to say hello. Right, I'm going to go for install. I don't need the graphical install because I haven't got a mouse attached or anything like that. We're just going to go for the text install. I imagine it'll have to do some stuff first, so we'll be patient. I'll find something to prop up the back of this so we can, yeah, there we go. Actually, while we're doing this, so what's the point of all of this? I don't know. Ooh, that was, okay. Right, so English. Oh, I've got no keyboard. All right, no, that's no good. That's really weird. Let's just try unplugging and replugging. Okay. So what's the point of all of this? This is a really old and very underpowered device. What am I going to do with this? Well, for one thing, Windows 10 is out of support life now anyway, and never really performed particularly well on this anyway. I'm just really doing this, I'm messing about, just seeing what's possible. If I do get this to work, I might embed this and make it into a kind of Linux picture frame type of device, you know, one of those digital picture frame devices. Maybe I'll use it for some display of some information or something like that. I don't know. I just want to see. Mostly, this is about scratching that curious itch about, can I actually install Linux on a relatively old Atom touchscreen tablet? Anyway, English. United Kingdom. British. Detecting hardware. Yeah, I could have done the graphical install, which would have been more sort of gooey, and you can select things with a mouse, but these textual installers using the curses interface like this tends to use less resources, tends to run a little bit quicker, and has fewer opportunities for something to go catastrophically wrong and just freeze. I mean, if we do actually get this working, I could fix these two things together to make the world's worst laptop. I chose Debian as the operating system here, mainly because I'm most familiar with Debian and Debian-based Linux distributions, Ubuntu, Linux Mint, those sorts of things. And I want something that might work with the touchscreen as well, which I think the GNOME or GNOME desktop will potentially do, assuming it finds drivers for the digitizer on the screen. Okay, it's doing stuff still. And hopefully we will have enough battery to see us through this install process. Some of your hardware. Right, it says detect network hardware. It's found a wireless network card in here, and it says it's missing this driver, which is a Broadcom driver for the Onda V919. If you have such media available, insert it now. Well, I don't have such media available, and also the keyboard's fallen off again. So I'm just going to unplug and replug, and then, yeah, the keyboard just seems to periodically go missing from here. I'll say no. We can modify that later. No network interfaces were found. Okay, we'll just continue. What do we want to call the host name? Okay, so we've just breezed past the password information. Now it's finding the disks, so it's going to find that 64 gig. Now this is the point where we get to destroy Windows on here, so this is really the point of no return for this device. Actually, it's not the point of no return because I can download, I think you can still download the image for this device, and I could re-image the disk if I wanted to, but I don't need any Windows devices. Use entire disk. I don't want to use the 64 gig storage device because that's the thing it's installing from. So I'm going to use this MMC. Really all files in one partition. I don't see any reason not to on such a small disk as this. It's not like it's got multiple volumes in there. So finish partitioning. Okay, well, here we go. This is the point where Windows goes bye-bye. And here we go. Installing the base system. Like I say, I hope we've got enough charge in those batteries to get us through this process, because I can't switch back to charging because that device, that USB hub, can only do one or the other. So yeah, even if that wireless doesn't get detected later on, I've got some little USB wireless things that are very generic, so I can plug those into the USB hub to get this device online and get it talking to its repositories, where it might find the driver for its inbuilt Wi-Fi card. If I even need networking on this, I may choose some method of using this that doesn't need networking at all. 97%, 100%, so that's everything installed. Scanning the installation mirror. Okay, a network mirror. You installing from a DVD? Use a network mirror? No. Have I lost the... Yeah, the keyboard's gone again. Okay, let's just try the same again. Okay. No, I don't want to use a network mirror. Select and install software. So this whole process here is probably one of the main reasons why Linux is not as popular an operating system as Windows. Most people who use Windows use it because it was already on the machine they bought. Same with Mac OS. In fact, that's the only way you can do it with Mac OS. Whereas with Linux, you've generally, I mean, there are some machines available with Linux pre-installed, but they're few and far between. Generally, if you want to use Linux, you have to install it on a computer. It's not typically any more complex than installing Windows. It's just that most people never have to do that step. Right, it's asking me to choose a desktop environment, and I'm going to choose GNOME. Is it GNOME, GNOME, or is it GNOME? Arguments in the comments. I mean, I could use Mate, but I think it's going to be GNOME. So yeah, the installation process is a significant hurdle for most kind of everyday users of their computer, just because it's a thing you don't normally do if you bought the computer and it already had an operating system on it. There are other reasons why Linux is not as widespread or popular as other operating systems. One of them is obviously just in market inertia. If you use Linux, you have to use software that works on Linux, and not all software that people use is available to use on Linux. There are usually alternatives, but if you're, for example, highly invested in the Adobe ecosystem, you won't really get that working on Linux. I mean, people have tried, but certainly you wouldn't want to do that in a production environment where you're earning your crust using that software. And like I say, there are alternatives to all of the things that Adobe software does. There are Linux alternatives to all of those. But if you have to interact with people in the same industry who want to exchange files with you, who expect you to use certain skill sets, then you might be tied in to a certain software ecosystem, and you might be stuck using Windows or Mac. Okay, so we've got a time countdown now, which is actually went from 11 to 16 minutes. Anyway, oh, it's 1 hour 28 now. Or is it? So yeah, this time thing, it's 7 minutes now. This obviously is not all that useful. It's recalculating its best guess based on what it has to do versus what's done so far. But yeah, like many a progress bar, it can't give you a very accurate answer. It is a technical problem. It is a difficult problem as far as computers are concerned. You can estimate how long something is going to take based on how much of it you've done and how long it's taken so far, but these processes don't all necessarily take the same amount of resources from the system. They don't all necessarily, even though this is probably just bytes written, bytes left to right. But clearly it's not as simple as that. I think it might be Tom Scott who did a video on why progress bars are never accurate. If I can find that video, I will link to it in the description and in this card. My gut feeling is this is going to take about 20 minutes. Okay, I'm going to stop now and I will return when this is done, because otherwise it's just a running commentary of a number going up. This, by the way, is the tool of separation for the capacitive screen with glass. So yeah, if I do want to take this apart, actually this will be the tool I use. If I want to take this touchscreen off and just have the bare LCD there, which I might do. If I want to install this in a picture frame, for example, and make it into a digital picture frame, I might not want the touchscreen. And I might not want all of this top and bottom paraphernalia. I might just want the little LCD and the motherboard. We shall see. Of course, if I do that, I'll have to make sure that everything on there runs automatically and doesn't require any touch input. Getting close now, 94%. Really just want to get to the bit where it says, okay, you can reboot now, because what I'll do before I do that is put it on charge for a bit. Okay. Right, installing grub. Looking for other operating systems. Well, there shouldn't be any because we've just overwritten them. Okay, installation complete. Yay! Okay, so installation is complete, so it's time to boot into your new system. Make sure to remove the installation media so that you boot into the new system rather than restarting the installation. Please choose continue to reboot. Okay, I am going to do that, but yeah, take the installation media out. We've lost the keyboard again. And continue. Okay, we will just try and boot. Oh, here we go, that's the menu. So, yeah, it's going to boot directly into Debian. Wow, that's tiny text. Driver failed on Cherry View something, but that's not, doesn't look like that was a fatal error. This is just various modules and things being loaded. This bit here is talking about the wireless driver again. I've got a screenshot of that file name anyway, so I'll find it. Here we go. So we're now running Debian on here. I wonder if the touchscreen is working. There's no touchscreen keyboard though, so and of course I've got no mouse plugged in. Although the touchscreen should pretty much function as a mouse. So it's not going to be fast. Welcome, you want to, no, I'll skip the tour. And there we are. We've got a dock here. Yeah, not that quick. So we've got Debian working on here, which is just, you know, it's just Linux. That was, I would say, a slightly more complicated install than the average one. It can go a lot smoother than that, and it can just be a complete click through. So just as this whole segment exists really just to give you an idea of what it looks like to install Linux on a machine that hasn't had it before. Updates are out of date. Okay, well, oh, we got a battery indication here, that's good. So we're still on 68%. Oh, I've turned my screen brightness down. So yeah, there's all sorts of things are working here. There's a volume control, there's a screen brightness thing, there's a battery indicator that's telling us we've got 68% battery left. So the battery in here is still good. That's interesting because it wasn't before we started this whole process. So I think disconnecting it and reconnecting it has enabled the BIOS or the motherboard firmware to recalibrate that battery. And we still got, yeah, apparently 2 hours and 38 minutes left of battery. Anyway, for now, I'm going to shut down. I don't know how to do that on this user interface. That's Interesting. Is it there? Yeah, here we go. Power. And power off. And we'll come back and do some more stuff with this a bit later. Okay, we're booted back in again, and interestingly, screen rotation is working after a fashion. It's all a bit back to front. That's upside down. That's the clock. That's the title at the top. So screen rotation works okay when it's horizontal, but when you turn it vertically, the screen is upside down. I'm sure there's a fix for that. But otherwise, what's interesting is that there is a nice little on-screen keyboard. So when we go to search the settings and tap into a text field, nice little on-screen keyboard pops up automatically. That's at least as good as it was on Windows. In fact, it's probably better, a little bit more reliably popping up. This is just the graphical interface for the settings. There will be more settings than this underneath to mess around with. I can't actually find anything on the display settings about rotation, but it's going to need a little bit of tinkering, possibly in the terminal. But yeah, that's one of the potential downsides of a Linux install on a piece of kit that was never conceived to run it, is that if anything like this screen rotation goes awry, you are going to have to find a solution, and you're probably going to have to get into the terminal to do something about it. And that can be a bit scary, but there's usually guides and online help resources that will just tell you what to type, essentially. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm going to have a play with this and see if I can sort the thing out. And then we've got to decide what I'm actually going to do with this. Right, there's only a few things I need to do with this. One of them was to clean the screen. I've done my best, actually. It's still a little bit grimy, but hopefully that's better. The next one is to sort out this screen rotation thing. So there's a problem with the screen rotation. Only in the portrait modes. When you turn it to portrait mode, it rotates the wrong way when it's booted up. That should be a fairly simple configuration fix. And the other one is to sort the Wi-Fi out on here. It didn't recognize the network card. So I've got this other USB mini wireless card here. This is a network interface. I'll plug that into here, and then we'll attach that via USB when this is switched on. And hopefully it will automatically detect this one and load generic drivers for it. And then we might be able to get online, get to the updates, and the updates might pick up the missing Wi-Fi card that's built in. If not, I might be able to find the driver online. I mean, the other thing I could do here is just repair this case and stick it back together and have this as a Linux tablet. That might be a thing I do, depending on whether I can think of a creative use for this. Anyway, so let's plug this in. See if it recognizes new hardware. Oh, there is now a Wi-Fi menu, and it's found my Wi-Fi. Okay, so we're connected to Wi-Fi, that's good. And we probably ought to then do updates. Software updates. That says it's up to date. That's interesting, because that one looks like a refresh symbol, but that was the actual refresh symbol. So it says it's up to date. Interesting. So the next thing to do, I think, is unplug that Wi-Fi card and see what happens. Yes, I'm not getting a Wi-Fi thing at all here. So I need to try to find the driver for that, for the inbuilt Wi-Fi. Okay, let's do that. So Broadcom had only one file to download for this, a zip file. Let's see what's inside it. Doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Or it might just be taking forever to open. This is not the fastest machine. So, you know, we need to set our expectations accordingly. Is there like a file browser thing on here? Oh, there it is. It's that thing. Yeah, I have a feeling this thing is just too underpowered to be usable. It's a shame. But it was an interesting experiment in installing Linux on a very antiquated tablet. It might well be that I install an even more basic version of Linux on here, that it doesn't have a desktop at all, and just use this and just set this up as some sort of terminal. Now I think we've frozen actually. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think it's crashed. Probably trying to unzip that driver's file and struggling with RAM or something. But yeah, it's frozen. No, looks like we're out of luck. I'll probably have to reset that. So yeah, I think that's probably the end of this little escapade. I think I will keep this thing, and what I might try to do is revisit that idea to replace this battery. I'm just going to reset this because it's obviously not doing anything. So I might revisit this idea to take the battery out and directly power it from 3.8 volts. So what I can do there is get a USB cable, put a diode on there just to drop 1 volt, and just feed it directly with 4 volts. So here we've got 2 red cables, that's going to be 2 positives. We've got 2 black cables, that'll be grounds. We've got a white cable, which is probably for battery monitoring, which I could probably ignore. So at some future point, I might take these batteries out, recycle them, try and power it off of 5 volts, which will mean that I can then use this USB port exclusively for interfaces, and then add a keyboard, maybe build it into some kind of little retro terminal thing. Ooh, that's not good. Yeah, see there's some orphaned inodes there. That was problems with the file system. So I think trying to open that zip file might have just been a bit too much for it. So yeah, end of story. And if I install some shell-only version of Linux that I can use as a terminal to access my Altair 8800 clone, for example, then maybe that might get some utility out of it. In that case, I probably won't need the touch screen, so I'll better take that off, because these screws here come undone, and we can take the screen out of here and the little motherboard, dispose of the touch screen, probably remove the camera, you know, strip it down to just a board and a screen, and then use it maybe to make the screen a bit bigger on my Franken terminal, because my Franken terminal's got this tiny little screen. I don't mind, but a little bit more screen space might be nice. So that's the end of this segment. Sorry we didn't get anywhere with that, but this is random stuff. It's sometimes a bit like that. In the couple of weeks it's taken me to put this random stuff video together from various bits and pieces over time, it's occurred to me what I want to do with this tablet, and it was obvious. It was staring me in the face, actually. I have long wanted to make a mini arcade cabinet for a very specific game, and it's Seclus. It's the game that I did the complete playthrough of in a couple of videos a while back. So yeah, I want to make a little standalone arcade cabinet of that game. That's the plan. Anyway, and what I thought I was going to have to do to make that happen was find some sort of little mini PC, some sort of screen, power supply for all of those things, connect them all together. But of course I don't need to. This is screen and PC built in. And it's a Windows game, but it will run under Wine on this machine, or it should do anyway. So all I've really got to do is replace the power on this, build a cabinet for it, and add some controls. And the controls, it's going to be a keyboard, so it'll probably be one of these little things. I've got a few of these kicking about. It's a little macro keyboard. It's programmable. You can do any key presses you want. The game is fully keyboard controlled. It needs cursor keys plus a few action keys plus a few keys to be able to make the choices when you're entering the game, the start and quit and stuff like that. So I'll have to count up the number of keys I actually need. It may not be this device, but yeah, so some sort of little arcade console thing. That will be a future project. It's not going to happen in this video because there's a lot of sort of planning bits to be thought about for that. But that is the intended purpose for this machine, and I'll be able to build it into a cabinet so you don't have to see the camera or the Windows logo. I reckon that'll be quite nice. Anyway, that's everything for this random stuff video. If you're here at the end, thank you for surviving that torrent of wittering. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.